We're live, bro.
Yes.
Episode
What's up,
one.
Ben? Episode one. This is history.
History in the making, man. The Handpan Show, episode 1.
Ooh, la, la, la.
Very excited for this. How you doing today, man? You good?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Just did some nice videos for Mag Instruments. Actually, doing some little projects here and there with them. I love the instrument. The team is awesome. What did you do today?
Right now, just a little studio recording. Got a couple projects in the cooking right now. We're doing some recording the last couple of days.
Oh,
I'm extremely excited for this, man. Episode 1.
Yeah, me too. Honestly, we've been talking about that for so many
months.
Yeah,
man.
True.
But yeah, so just a quick for the listener, this is the Handpan Show. It's basically just open discussion, open talks with people in the handpan world or close next to it, led by myself and Dave. Just having discussions around these instruments that
friends we gather throughout the years. Some people we met. It's gonna be pretty diverse and excellent. I'm eager to start.
Me too, man. And what a first guest we have.
This one. Oh, that
man.
One.
I mean, there's like this. The world is only, what is it? 2001. The instrument was made. I mean, this guy has been like top class guy from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. This kind of guy. He was in the Handpan forum.
That's it.
Handpan.org.
That's it. CFoulke himself, Colin Foulke.
CFoulke.
We have for anybody who might not know, Colin is the creator. It's CFoulke. He'll clarify later on, but it's
we need to ask him some clarity about that.
CFoulke, Radix, Aether, and now Xenith. So you've seen him on everything. He's one of the leading faces anyway of the HCU, the fight to keep handpans legal. What do you say, man?
We might have some news about that, actually.
I hope so. I would really hope so. Yeah. But I'm ready to bring him on if you are. You good?
Yep.
Let's do it. Ladies and gentlemen, Colin Foulke. All right, here we are.
There you go.
Episode 1. Episode 1. The man, the myth, the legend, our first ever guest, the man who needs no introduction, Mr. Colin Foulke.
Hey, I'll take an introduction. Thanks for having me, guys.
We did it before we talked.
Okay, good.
We gave you a proper one before we jumped on here. How are you, man?
I'm good. It's early morning here in California. I imagine it's kind of late evening there for David and in France. And what about you, Dan?
Yeah, it's 11:40 a.m. So
look at us jumping time zones.
That's it, man.
World.
That's it. Mathematicians over here at the Handpan Show.
Yeah, I didn't know it required that kind of skill to set up a podcast.
Yeah.
So many math. Well, guys, honestly, this is history.
It's the first one, man.
Boom.
Yeah. Dude, thanks for having some patience with us, man, and sitting with us. Appreciate it. But
my pleasure. It's good. It's going to be good to talk. We got a lot to talk about.
There's a lot going on in your world, man.
Yeah,
but before we get into it, man, we want to get to like the building, your achievements, everything with HCU. But some people, like at face value, might not, like if they just saw the headlines of Colin Foulke, they might not realize that you've been around since 2009 playing. You've been around for quite some time. So what was just like the elevator brief? How did you get into it? What's your background with handpan stuff? Early days.
Oh, this is great. I have to do this all the time socially. So I do have my elevator pitch how I got into it. It was 2007. YouTube was just kind of starting. It's so funny to tell younger kids this because YouTube is just this truth to them. And you're like, it was this amazing thing where I could send a link to a video to my friend on the internet and they could watch it. Like this was just happening. So as I'm sure you guys were, I was doing this with a friend and we were sending videos back of different musical instruments. And one video linked to another one. And I saw this instrument that I'd never heard of and it was bolt of lightning, just boom, done. Yeah. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. But that was 2007. And at that time, it was so hard to find anybody that even had one, especially in the United States at that time. There was some import, not that much. So it took years to even get in the room with one. And at that point, it was kind of like this quiet obsession. I was almost a little bashful and ashamed that I was just so enthralled by this thing I'd never even been in the room with. But then when I got in the room with one and got to play it, it was immediate, like, yep, you were completely right. Trust that instinct. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And then I just kind of never looked back.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And like, it's crazy now. There's like this whole new class of players and like young people that are coming to the instrument. And, looking back on those times, I know that you've like somebody that I always try to like tell people about, like, you got to look at this dude is Dante Bucci. And I know that you had a nice relationship with Dante. And I was hoping maybe for, people who have never got to spend time with him, didn't really know him. Like, do you have like a memory that sticks out of him or like a nice story about him? Who was he to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get struck with Dante grief every once in a while. For those who don't know, he kind of passed away unexpectedly. Yeah, so I kind of had like the dream run with Dante in that I started as just like a diehard fan. And so for people that might not have historical reference, Dante was the premier player in the United States in the early days. Yeah. He was someone who was posting videos on YouTube.
Exactly.
You'd click and watch a video, and then you'd click and watch his, and you'd go, oh, so that's how it's supposed to be played, right? He was above and beyond everyone at that time. And then continued to progress like that.
So creative, especially at that early age of the hung.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he was kind of on the bleeding edge of playing and techniques. So I started kind of just as a total fanboy of Dante. And then through some exchanges on handpan.org, it came up, and Dan, this is going to cycle back to you. It came up that Dante had been asked by Spangle to cover for Manu Delago for the song that he does on their live show. Yeah. And Dante was kind of unsure of which scale Manu had, and being just the fanboy that I am, I was like, I know what it is. And so I communicated that to Dante, and then that kind of started a light rapport between the two of us, chatting on the forum and kind of realizing like, oh, we're both kind of like to function on the higher level stuff, the scale, geekery, playing tech. And so kind of what ended up happening is we kind of ended up being kind of peers, I guess. We ended up running some workshops together at festivals in North Carolina. And so we kind of like ended up on this peer level of playing and kind of how deep our interest was in the instrument and the genre. No, and then kind of like the dream shift was then we just kind of became friends. Yeah. And we'd see each other socially at festivals. He came out and stayed with us for a week out here and did some work in the workshop with me. So he was a great influence. He's sorely missed. I think the one thing that always surprised me about Dante that he told me is that he only would write one new song a year. That's it. That was his goal. But when you go and you listen to his pieces like Flageolet or any of them,
Reminiscence, boom.
Man, they're so dense. Yeah. So dense and so full that you're like, that would take a year to really not only compose, but then to master that piece.
Yeah, man. Yeah. But he's one of the dudes that like when people are talking about, especially like the American scene that, you and I are a part of, it's like, you gotta look back a little bit at this guy, because if you want the greatest, that's him. But dude, thanks for sharing that with everybody.
Hey, guys, it takes me 3 years for a song, actually. I'm this guy who has my last album is like 6 years old, something like that.
That's it. You're due, man. You're due for a new one. But yeah, man. And then you kind of hit this like monumental shift from wanted to be, or not, you're still like this player, you're still a great player, but from fan to player builder, to builder. So what was that transition like for you? When did that start?
Like if I really look back, there was always a super deep curiosity in how these instruments work and how they function. And in the early days, it was just total mystique. No one talked about, no one really knew. And then there was a few people that kind of started peeling the layers back. And so, the first front runners were Kyle Cox of Pantheon Steel, Louis of PanArt, and then for sure Victor of SPB.
And Izan?
And Izan too, yeah. So Izan, there was kind of like the first wave of new makers outside of PanArt. Yeah. And then there was kind of this second wave, which were players turn tuners turn makers. And so I kind of put myself in that second wave. And what I think happened is that first wave showed it was possible. But a lot of them came from a previous background of crafting steel pans. And so someone like Izan or Victor, they were the first ones who weren't that. They weren't steel pan trained makers. They were just people and guys who were enthusiastic and
fans first. Yeah.
Fans first. Yeah. So those guys were so inspiring. And so there was kind of quite a few who kind of came up in my time, who were players turned makers. And so someone like Michael Colley, who is Asiel, and even Ralph of Ayasa, we were all kind of around the same time, which I think is kind of that second wave of makers who were kind of the players turned makers.
Yeah.
And it's a unique position to be in because, I mean, essentially I make every instrument for me and I just have to sell them to be in business. But that's my intention, is I'm making things that I like and I like to play. And I'm putting things in there that are high functional and give the players a lot of opportunity. So it is a unique place that to have someone who's a maker who also can play at a high level. Yeah. And I think a lot of that was the player turned maker, kind of that second. But
still you were obsessive.
I like to say passionate, David.
Passionate, yeah. I don't because no, but guys, I'm translating in French. It's better when you say obsessed. It's not bad. It's like
no. I think it's very fair to say that I was obsessed at that time.
Yeah.
And then passion is just maybe the more controlled version of obsession. No, but I think about it like I just feel like I'm so fortunate. How fortunate I am to find something that just completely enraptured me and still does. People go through their entire life and never find that thing for them, and I found it when I was 22. So I think I'm so fortunate that I've found this thing that really gets me going.
Yeah. And then you also had kind of that full, it's one of my favorite videos that you were so proud to share with the world is when Kyle Cox from Pantheon played your first one.
Oh, yeah.
And was visibly blown away by it. So for you, I'm sure it was kind of like you got to meet and befriend your idol, and then he was a fan of your work. Maybe not idol, it's not the best term, but
that's right up there. I put him on a pedestal. No, there's that's a really interesting arc. My arc with Pantheon Steel and Kyle Cox. There's a bunch of really cool kind of intertwining that's happened over the last decade. I first physically met Kyle in England at Hangout UK 2010. That we both went over for that, and that was the first time I witnessed someone tuning. And he was fine tuning instruments, and in fact, he fine tuned from sun up to sundown for 4 days straight. The poor guy. There was just such a need at the time, and he's so kind and loves the community so much that he didn't have a festival. He sat in an RV and tuned for days. But I remember watching him tune, and my ear from my previous musical training is pretty good, and it's I could hear what he was doing. I could hear him moving things around and making adjustments, but I had no idea how he was doing that. And it was like watching a black magic happen right in front of your eyes. And these things would go into the tent, and a half hour they'd come back out, and it was miraculous. And so I think that was an early seed that was planted, watching him fine tune at Hangout. That moment, it is on video. You can watch it. I remember, so it was my second instrument, my second hand played instrument that I had made. And I kind of was shopping it around at festivals to show people, hey, this is where I'm at. And also at those festivals, I was taking the torch from Kyle, and I was the guy stuck in a basement tuning the whole weekend. But I figured this moment was going to happen. I figured Kyle was going to play that instrument. And I completely missed it. I had gone to bed because I was exhausted, and I had another day of tuning the next day, which is a really high rigor day. It's like finals in college kind of day. Your brain is so mushy by the end of it. So I was like, I know I got a big day tomorrow. I'm just going to go to bed. And so fortunately, someone captured this moment, and Kyle did exactly what I would do to an instrument. The first thing he does is he kind of goes over it with a fine tooth comb, kind of checks it out, sees what's there, kind of tests it, plays it a little hard, and then he kind of sits back, and then he just experiences it and plays it for what it is. And it's a 5 or 6 minute video. And at this point, like a crowd has formed, and he finished playing it, and it kind of goes quiet. And he looks up at the camera and he just goes, "I quit." And you're like, "Dad, I don't think I've processed that compliment. What an amazing compliment he's just like, I no longer need to do this. Someone else has.
That was your second instrument?
The second one. Yeah.
Do you still have this instrument?
The second one still lives around here. I see it on occasion. The first one I still have, which is right there with the same quality.
You kept these instruments.
Yeah,
it's
those are special ones. I mean, you can't sell those.
Special ones. Yeah,
it's right over there. I can see it. And so that was an amazing moment. And I woke up the next morning anticipating that Kyle's going to play it, and then I heard it already happen, and someone showed me the video, and then there was something that happened that the next morning that it didn't even register until 2 years later. And I don't think I've ever actually talked to Kyle about this, but this is going to be a story worth telling. So if you go back kind of into Kyle's history, he was in the world of steel pans for a long time. And this Jim Dewson, the late Jim Dewson, he told me this story that Kyle as Pantheon Steel, they were at not a music festival, but a thing where the whole industry comes together and they meet and show and tell, and
a trade show or something.
That's the word. Yeah. Thank you. They were at a trade show, and kind of the godfather of steel pans, Ellie Manette, was there, and he walked up to Kyle's booth and kind of asked Kyle, would you mind if I play? And Kyle had a pair of double seconds out. So Ellie does exactly what Kyle did to me, kind of goes through them, checks them all out, and then just plays them and experiences them. It goes on, I think, for maybe 10 minutes or so. And Ellie, he puts the mallets down, and he kind of turns to Kyle and walks over to him and just gives him a hug. Doesn't say anything, gives him a hug, embraces him, and then just moves on. And it was the most striking moment for Kyle at that point in his career. Jim was like, it just meant so much to him that it was just like full approval of like, you're doing it. Well done. Carry on. And so I had heard that story. And so the next morning after this incident where Kyle had played my instrument and had that reaction, he came up and he's like, "Hey, bro, I played your instrument." I was like, "Oh, wow. Like, yeah, I heard." And then he comes up and he gives me a hug. And he's not a real touchy-feely guy. So I was like, "Oh, like, Kyle." And it was 2 years later that I went like, "Oh my gosh, he gave me the hug."
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, you idiot." Like, it was the highest compliment. You didn't even realize it. But I think that the slow burn of it finally clicking that, like that, what a compliment. So, on the back end of that, though, to receive that kind of feedback on your second instrument, it's kind of like, well, now what? I thought that was going to take years to achieve.
Dude. Well, I mean, you look at even artists, it's like you listen to their first and second albums, you're like, this isn't very good. So for you to have your second ever, album, your second ever project, and have like your literal hero say like, "Hey, nice
we
job."
shouldn't even compare it as albums, but as track. It's like your second track,
Yeah, for real.
And so it felt a little bit like, your guru is like, "Congratulations, you're enlightened," and you're like, "Now what?"
I can die. Now I can die.
I was like, "Well, I
just
guess
start floating.
So that was a real high moment in my early career.
Excellent.
Yeah, man. And I know you have a bunch of stuff that we're like, it's present day. There's a lot of stuff with you going on, but the last thing,
it's fun to reminisce.
Yeah, dude. And so the last kind of reminiscing thing for right now, anyway, you introduced hydroforming and essentially gave it to everybody.
Yeah.
Like, what was that?
You started everything by hands, right? Only hammers, thinking the shell.
So I started with, I kind of joke, but I started in a shop with no electricity and no doors. And I had a barrel and 3 hammers, and I just got busy.
There you go, real caveman.
And to back up, for the first 6 months, I didn't tell anybody what I was doing. Like my wife knew, and like 1 or 2 other people knew. I was completely radio silent, and I had some goals that I wanted to try to achieve. And I knew at the end of the 6 months, I was going to see Kyle Cox at one of the festivals, and this is like a year before he played my first hand played instrument, and I was just about time for the festival, and I finally got to a point where I was like, I think I have a question that's going to be worth cashing in on, contacting Kyle. And it was about shoulder tones, and shoulder tones are kind of some of the harder things to deal with in terms of tuning. And I was starting to see them and have awareness and dabble with them. But I had a specific question about it. So I kind of called him and was like, so I picked up the hammer. And I didn't want to cash in and be like, so how do you tune? How do you move an octave around? I wanted to wait until I had, a real juicy,
like a deep question.
Question. And so I asked him, and he gave me a very eloquent answer, and it was super helpful. And at the end of the call, he kind of was like, hey, if this is the type of question you're asking after 6 months, like, you might be born to do this work. So kind of take that feather in the cap on that one. But it was so encouraging, because I was out in the dark back then. There was no one to really talk to. There was no resources on the internet. I was just in a room experimenting and trying to learn and build this thing.
So you were not in touch with all these other guys?
No.
There
weren't that many. Later on, I kind of exposed on handpan.org what I've been up to, but it was a real slow burn. So
Handpan.
Yeah, like the end of 2013, I went and visited Michael Colley in France, the ACL headquarters, and we were kind of at the same pace and level at that point. And then I also visited Xenith at the end of 2013.
Do you remember his YouTube avatar, his YouTube name?
Who?
Michael Colley YouTube name.
Oh, yeah, Intonation. Yeah.
Intonation. If someone is listening to this podcast and know Intonation, you are an old guy.
Yeah.
Intonation.
But that was, by the time I visited those guys, I was already tuning at a higher level, and it was more kind of go for camaraderie. And yeah, Ethan was really supportive and gave me some great advice. And then, I was kind of off and running. So,
wow.
Yeah. So sorry to come back to hydroforming. So I started with everything by hand, and then moved to what was the common technique then, which was air hammers and pneumatic hammers, think small jackhammers. And if with a big mallet, 2 hours to make a shell, if you're good. With a air hammer, an hour, again, if you're good. And it's a brutal hour. And for those who don't know, I'm 6'5". I'm the right man to be wielding hammers this big, and it breaks your body. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so I've been kind of, wondering about other techniques, and I was kind of stumbled across this idea of using water pressure to bend metal, which is hydroforming. We specifically do kind of a subcategory that's called fluid forming, which is the fluid is right on the part. Hydroforming traditionally uses bladders under pressure, but we don't do that. Yeah, so I spent kind of the year of 2015 developing a machine that could take a flat sheet of steel and make kind of our initial blank shell. It was not without great trials and tribulations, but I will never forget the first day that machine ran. Because I've been spending weeks trying to keep the pressure, and that was the issue I was facing. And I kept losing pressure, and the plates are 1.5 inches thick, and I hadn't even bent the metal enough to clear the plates, which means I hadn't even moved the metal much.
Yeah.
And then this one day I had this idea to try, and it was kind of my last ditch effort for that week. And I turned the machine on. Mind you, I'm like standing across my shop. I have a blast shield on. I'm hiding behind a barrier, because it's, the pressure is big pressure. And at that point, we didn't quite know how much pressure it was going to be. So it was scary territory. And I remember I turned it on, and it was one of those moments where everything slows down, heartbeat in the ears, no sense of time. And I see the shell clear the plate, and I was like, already, this is the best we've done. And it was forming up, and I had like a crossbar at the approximate height, being like, if this metal can stretch and hit that crossbar, I shut it off, and we've done it. And it just keeps marching along, and it's like creaking, making the noises that make you a little nervous. And it formed, and it hit the crossbar, and I shut it off. I ran over, and I released pressure, and it was immediate of like, oh, this is a golden goose I have here.
Yeah.
And it's what a wonderful place to be. But then you're like, what do we do with said golden goose? To have a machine that doesn't cost that much money to make, that is hyper consistent, that you can do in-house at that point in our industry, it didn't exist. except for maybe Pantheon's rolling machine, but that is such an advanced robot. It's
it's like massive too, right? It's like this huge thing.
It's a big thing. Yeah. It's very complicated. And so, I think one of my gifts is that I'm not a formal engineer, so I don't have the ability to over-engineer things. My ability is to engineer it as little as possible to get it to work. So I'm always looking for kind of simplistic solutions. Now, simple doesn't mean bad. It just means, not complex. Yeah. And so this is, the machine itself is really not that complex. You just capture water and kind of like physics takes care of the rest of it. And looking back now, there was a year of conversations of trying to figure out what to do with this machine. Do I patent it? Do I not patent it? Do I keep it top secret? Do I keep it in a room that nobody ever gets to see? And the final decision was that no, I'm going to give it away. And the reason being is it's a great canvas. It creates a wonderful canvas. And there's other ways to create canvases that make wonderful things, but this is just one way to do it. And you can do it in-house, and you're not going to murder your body trying to make these shells. But it's just that. It's a canvas. It's a blank canvas. You still have to be a good painter. And you still have to earn those stripes the hard way. Just don't kill yourself making your shell. So kind of once I got to that point, it was like, oh, well, then we should give it away. We should open source it. But then that becomes a whole nother problem. Like, how do you open source something like that? That could be highly dangerous. Has some technicalities that you have to be really careful about. So then it was a lot of planning kind of leading up to that. Yeah. So in 2016, I opened
the Hangout USA, right?
Yeah, at Hangout USA. And I remember, I'm not without an ego. And I remember telling the director of the festival, I was like, look, I'm going to give this thing away and I'm going to ask for nothing in return, but I wouldn't mind maybe like a round of applause. No. And really what had happened is I had spent a year top secret making and developing the machine and then developing an instrument from it. And I had a lot I wanted to talk about. It was a really tough, scary, arduous journey, and I wanted to share that. And I also wanted to share that I was going to give it away. So I did maybe a 40-minute talk with slides and stuff, and that was my way to kind of process what I'd gone through and to explain the reasonings of why I was going to give it away. So it was really fun and cathartic. And
any accidents with the water?
We haven't had any. I can still count to 10.
There you go.
I know these guys. It's not me.
It's all right.
I can still count to 10. Yeah. So there have been things. The plates are really thick and heavy. Someone broke a foot with one. Some guys up in Canada didn't purge the air out, which is like the number one thing to do. If you don't get the air out of the system, you're just going to make a bomb. And they did. Thankfully, they caught it on film. No, and so, we're now, for me, it's 8 years later. For the rest of the world, it's 7 years later since I open sourced it. And it's astonishing. Like, it's still going. So I have a map in my workshop where I've just dropped pins in when I hear about machines. I'm like, I just put a pin in like 2 months ago.
Oh, where the machines are. Yeah.
And it's still happening. And, people are using it for making, handpans, but people are using it for other reasons too. Like I worked with a high school student that wanted to make Captain America shields using my machine, and I said, "Heck yes,
yeah, dude. Let's do that. Yeah, just send one your way.
Let's do that." So it's been a really amazing thing. It's really humbling to see your idea wrap the world, for years and years and years. And to think that then enabled other people to use those shells to make high quality instruments, and the fact that it kind of nudged the industry is it's astonishing, and it's
not a small feat, man, by any means.
Yeah, so it's been amazing to kind of watch the progression of that over the years.
Yeah, and then kind of like in direct contrast to that, the fact that you just kind of gave it to the world and have at it. You find yourself now, current day, as like one of the leaders of the charge against, or not even against, but with HCU defending this instrument against the PanArt stuff. So, what is that? First of all, how did you even, when you heard all this news, what was your decision to be like, get me involved as much as I can? Like, what was your process into like the HCU and kind of getting everybody together for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, the elevator pitch of HCU is that there's a legal battle across the EU right now, where the company who originally developed the instrument, PanArt, is trying to use a copyright to kind of limit the ability to make, distribute, play, perform, kind of do anything with those instruments across Europe. Copyright law is such that the copyright's still good for 70 years after the death of the holder. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of round up and be like, it could be a century where handpans are illegal in the EU. And you kind of like, if you like think about it, like imagine if in the first 20 years of the violin, it was just made illegal in Europe.
Yeah.
Like it's an astonishing thing to think of.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're up against. I think I was actually like the last to know when things got started. Also, like I'm over here on the West Coast of the United States. I'm not in Europe. I'm not a European maker.
Yeah.
It really just might be time zone issues as we're dealing with here. No, it started, there was like a Facebook Messenger group and there was like 100 people in it. And I got thrown into that group. And then from that group, there was like another group that was made, a separate conversation. And then there was maybe like 40 people in that. And I got like lumped into that group. And then there was a third group that was made that was like 12 people. And I was also in that group. And I woke up to all of this one morning. And I was like, what are
600 messages?
Groups? Yeah. And, like, what are we talking about? And then there was this final group, and I just had a seat at the table. And I'm gonna just throw in a Lord of the Rings reference here, but it felt like that meeting, the meeting of Elrond, where you kind of look around and you're like, oh man, like everybody's here. Like everyone who has a seat at the table deserves a seat at this table. And for some reason, they think that I deserve a seat at this table. And so I kind of like sat down with a little bit of imposter syndrome, being like, what do we do? What are we doing?
What year was this that all this started?
This was September of 2020.
Okay. Yeah.
And it kind of started actually more like in July on the legal front. And it took a little while to kind of trickle down to the rest of us. And so, at that point, there was this court date that was going to happen in Germany, and we essentially kind of had 6 weeks to try to put up any kind of defense for this initial thing. And we really just kind of said, like, do we want to try to do something, yes or no? And if the answer is yes, we need to put everything aside and take this thing and run with it. And one thing we don't really talk about in HCU is that we're all competitors. We're industry competitors. Yeah, I lose sales to them, they lose sales to me. And that was another thing, being like, we also have to put that aside.
Yeah.
Got to squash anything. Egos at the door, gentlemen.
Yeah.
We've got 6 weeks to do this. And what was astonishing is that we pulled it off. I mean, it was just like rapid fire. And everyone pulled their weight. And we got kind of up and running. We established a name, established a website, established ourselves as an international nonprofit because we're going to have to move money around. We launched a GoFundMe that was a success. It gave us enough money to hire a giant intellectual property law firm.
250, right?
It was 100. It was like 170, I think, at that point.
I have 250 in mind. Yeah, that might be it. Yeah,
I wish it. We wish it was 250. I'll tell you that. And so we kind of were able to get up to speed quick enough to meet in the legal battle kind of head on. And then it has just continued on for, kind of 2.5 years now. So it is, to be very stark and clear, it is far from over. We're kind of just in an interim waiting for the next court date. Regardless of the outcome of the next court date, whether HCU wins or loses, whoever doesn't get the decision they want, you can appeal that decision, and it goes to the Supreme Court of Switzerland. Gentlemen, we're going all the way to the top here.
Wow.
Dust off the old suit there, Colin. You're going.
If our listeners want to know more about all this, can they subscribe to any newsletter of HCU?
Yeah, so the website's an easy one. It's HCU, just the letters HCU.global.
We'll put the link.
We'll do all that stuff.
Please donate. So there's definitely some things that we haven't talked about for strategic reasons, but this lawsuit on the HCU front now, we're over 500,000 euros into it.
So honestly, donating money really helps the handpan to stay alive.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
really serious. We're talking about the possibility of PanArt to tear down. Is it correct in English? Tear down some businesses and so it's a big thing.
Yeah, that was yesterday when we were kind of. Colin, you and I were talking, just getting ready for this and sitting down. I was, even as somebody who's like casually followed, like I would say I was pretty up to date. I thought anyway with like everything going on. I was like, oh, it's quiet now. Like that must be a good thing. And you were like, I don't think I've seen your head shake faster. Like you were like, no, it's far. But so like, what has actually been, there's like this release and this meeting and court date, like what's actually been resolved and actually been established in all of this?
Nothing has been resolved. Like not a thing. So, for the record, there was the police raided IASA's headquarters and seized 70
instruments.
70 instruments and 400 shells. This was in April of 2021. Those are still on lockdown. They haven't been freed up yet. Those things.
Can you imagine? You see the cops at your door, and they like in the movies.
Yeah. So I mean, like, it's still very real. So what we're heading into is the first kind of actual legal court date, where something could happen and start the point of resolution or potential resolution. So what is happening in the court date, which still has yet to be set, is the part one of the legal case, which is to examine, can PanArt use a copyright in this way? Can they even legally use it in the way that they're claiming? If the answer is no, then HCU gets the decision that we want. We imagine that they'll appeal up to the Supreme Court. If the answer is yes, then it goes to a part two, which again, we would probably appeal, but it would go to a part two. They're like, okay, sure, maybe you can use a copyright in this way, but are any of these people even infringing on your copyright in this way? So it's structured in a way that's beneficial to us, that even if we don't get part one, if we get part two, then we kind of get what we're looking for. But the reality is like, that's probably still a year or two away, if not even a little more.
What does it mean though for US builders and builders in like Asia or Australia? Like, what does it mean for people who are not in Europe?
Yeah, that's a great question. It means that I couldn't sell or ship or import anything into the EU. And even one of my customers, if they took one of their instruments and crossed borders, it could be confiscated and destroyed. So yeah, I mean, it does impact me on a business level. Yeah. So for those who don't know, there is a documentary that's being filmed about this. We're year and a half, maybe close to 2 years into filming. And that was the first question the documentarian asked me: is this even your fight? And I was like, I knew you were going to ask that question. It's a good question. Why do you care? You're in America. Like, it doesn't impact you. And she's absolutely right. From a business perspective, it would be great if the EU went under. It's my biggest competitor. It'd be great. But as we've talked about, that's not why I do this, right?
Thanks a lot. Thanks to you and also that group of 12 people. I know there was some European, but thank you, guys.
Yeah. No, it's right. I do it because it's, I'm passionate about the art form. And, I do it for the person in Europe who hasn't found this instrument yet and is going to need to. I want to protect that. That's the baseline.
Yeah, man.
Excellent.
And like this one, I mean, we can cut this if it's going to get you in any legal trouble. But like, what do you think personally is going to be the outcome of all of this? Like with everything that you've been privy to with courts and meetings and their attitude and blah, 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 blah. Like, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think like a really annoying thing that has happened is when I tell people who do anything in the legal realm about this case, they go like, oh, wow, that's actually a pretty interesting approach using a copyright in that way. And I just want to be like, you're wrong. But it's creative. It's a very creative and interesting approach to try to apply a copyright. And what this really means is like, this is like the bleeding edge of copyright law in the EU. And our legal team is they're so engrossed with this because it's so interesting to them. So it's a little bit like, hey, we're kind of out in the unknown here. I think what I've been coming to terms with, I really want it to be black and white. I really want it to be 100% win. The reality is it could be a little bit more of a gray decision. Like, hey, of the 5 things that they're trying to get, they are going to get 2 of them, and you guys have to deal with it. It could be as simple as that. I hope for a clean sweep for HCU. The reality is with legal stuff, it's usually not that clean.
Sure.
But I think the reason I'm sleeping better these days is I can absolutely tell you there is not one more thing that we could have done as HCU.
Yeah.
No stone left unturned, no specialist not contacted. The legal team that we worked with is one of the biggest legal law firms that deal with intellectual property in the world, and we're still footing that bill, but I don't think there's a darn thing that we could have done more. So if the outcome is not in our favor,
Yeah,
we did everything we could.
Yeah. So what was this whole thing like for you, man? I mean, anybody listening or seeing anything that you've done the past like decade, like, Felix and Sabina, who are people who might not know, are like the people who run that's PanArt is Felix and Sabina, like, to somebody who the handpan changed your life, it changed the life of your friends, it's it's everything. Like, what's it like for you to know that those two people are like kind of doing this? Like, what was that?
Yeah,
what does that do for you?
It's complicated.
Yeah.
I've never met them. I've never spoken with them, so there's a little bit of that of being like, oh, they're kind of, in that sense, they're kind of unknown entities to me personally. No, it's there's a thing going on right now where a lot of people who have the ability to tune and retune instruments won't touch a PanArt hung right now because of their feelings towards PanArt, and that's complicated for me because I'm mad at Felix and Sabina right now. I'm not mad at them when they made that instrument. Yeah. And the only person that's really getting punished out of all of that is the person who just wants to play it and have it be in tune. So, that's kind of where I'm at with it. They're complicated feelings, and it's hard to understand what their motivations are and why they're pursuing this case. And I just have made a choice to not try to get into that headspace and understand why they're doing it. I'm very clear on my convictions and why I've chosen to be involved. And that's kind of where I've just kept it. So yeah, I'm not mad at the hung. I'm really not even mad at PanArt when they were in production, of course, but I'm frustrated with them currently and struggle with it because we really still don't have a really clear idea of what their motivations are and what they hope to achieve by pursuing this. And it's, it leaves you with mixed feelings. So
yeah, exactly. And it's hard to position ourselves in front of them because they are still our heroes. Like, they made that instrument, but now it's weird. I have some friends, they sold their hung. Yeah, they sold it. Like, I don't want to touch this anymore, I'm done. And there are so many other great instruments.
Well, no, I had this bigger thought about that kind of led me to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm not mad at the hung, I'm just frustrated with those two individuals right now. I was thinking about this concept of like, when I tune an instrument, especially right here behind me, when I'm rough tuning it, I'm physically hitting it with a hammer. I am using my force, my kinetic energy to tune this thing. And what happens is there's this interesting transference of energy, and I'm talking like physics, not mystical energy. What happens is we talk about that only certain materials work for tuning, and the reason being is because they have to be able to handle compression. We push the metal down and we need it to stay pushed down, stay compressed. And what that is imagine that you have a weight on a spring and it makes the spring compress under compression. And so now there's a bunch of potential energy in that spring, right? If you remove the weight, it does the spring thing. Well, a handpan note, in my view now, is the same thing. It is storing all this potential energy, but that potential energy came from my kinetic energy, me actually hammering it. And so if we kind of go into the mystic energy, now my energy from that day, from when I was tuning it, is stored in that instrument forever. It's in there. And then the players of these, when you play, you transfer kinetic energy into the instrument and you interact with my potential energy from that day.
Whoa.
Right? And that is what creates the sound. It is actually the interaction of the player's kinetic energy and the tuner's stored potential energy in the note. And that's what this whole thing is about. Excellent. So I would actually might disagree with your friend, David, who sold their hung, being like, oh, were you really mad at them when they made that? Because that was them in 2007 or 2005.
That was their energy back then. Back then they were okay.
Precisely.
Honestly,
so when I kind of worked through the logic in that way, I was like, oh, I'm not mad at the hung. I'm not even mad at when they made that. I'm currently frustrated with the choices that they're making right now. And I'm still going to tune because I'm not looking to punish the person that is playing this.
You know what? I used to know them. I was over there many times doing their open door days. I slept at their house, at dinner and stuff with them. And we don't know what's going on. I spoke recently with Manu Delago. we did that. He's going to release his masterclass, or maybe his masterclass is already released if you're listening to that episode in 2000 and whatever. We'll see. And but he told me the same. I don't know what to think. And everyone who got a real contact with these guys, and we don't know what's going on. And it's really hard to find their motivation.
Absolutely. No,
it cannot be only financial. It cannot be only ego. It's weird.
Yeah.
What a mystery.
Crazy. And then, man, I was trying to write HCU centered notes and questions, and I was like, I don't know if he's allowed to even say some stuff. So before we move on from this, is there anything that like maybe we didn't ask or you didn't touch on that you think is important for everyone to know?
There's Felix at the window, bro. There's Felix at the window right behind you.
I know. I gotta get the dog ready to go bark at him to get him away from here.
Yeah, we were in a place in like April of 21 where we were financially dead in the water, and we were going to lose by financial forfeit. Meaning we just can't continue to kick the stick down the road to get to the point where a decision is made. We're nearing that place again. And we're so close right now to getting to that first court date where we could clean sweep it. So now,
if they ever win, it's over for us in the EU, and then it's all right for you guys, or everyone will have to move to Thailand or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, essentially they would have kind of copyright control over the EU, which could mean, depending on how far they want to take it, it could mean that you wouldn't be allowed to perform or workshop or teach.
Master the handpan. Sorry, it's very selfish, but
yeah, it's not very selfish, it's very serious.
New Jersey, man. New Jersey, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, California's great this time of year. So I'm just going to pump up funding. Like, we're so close. We've done so well. We've had so many people support us in so many different ways. And right now that the support that we need is financial. We just need to get to this court date, and anything that anybody can do, hcu.global, the crowdfunding is still live. So if you donate there, that's what we need.
We'll put all these links, right?
Yeah, we got them in the description and stuff. Yep.
This is the first episode. We don't really know what we can do, but I think we can insert some links.
You know what? It's gonna be with no border, no nothing. It's just gonna be Times New Roman font. In the middle of the screen. But yeah, man, I mean, thanks for, I know you've been doing the updates on, HCU, and you've kind of been, I know a lot of people have been talking about it, but I feel like you've been, very on camera, kind of talking head for a lot of people about this. So what's the documentary? Is it covering all of this, I'm guessing? Yeah. So no shortage of content.
We were approached in kind of early 2021 by a documentary filmmaker from New Zealand. She had just kind of recently got her first handpan, and then as part of it kind of caught the story, and she immediately saw that there was so much depth to the story. It's right out of the gates. It's about this fascinating musical instrument that almost everybody has not heard of. It's still relatively unknown to the world. It's a very young instrument that is established, so that's really unique. That doesn't happen that often. And then there's this legal battle that in the legal world, it's a fascinating legal battle. The trying to use copyright in this new way, really, really interesting, complicated version of the law. It's also in 3 different countries, in multiple different languages. So it's not, we have our legal team, but they're in Germany, which there's stuff in Germany. But then also we have a Swiss legal team who's dealing with the stuff in Switzerland. And then we also have a legal team in the Netherlands. And so you're dealing with and how each one of those countries deals with copyright law is different.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then you have a community of people who are supporting this legal thing. And then you have a group of industry competitors who have decided to put everything aside and work together for the greater good. And then kind of on top of all that, you have this company who is making these decisions, and we don't understand their motivations. And you're watching them completely tarnish and ruin their legacy, which is a dumpster fire in its own right.
Yeah.
So when you put all that together, you're like, wow, that story actually has some legs. There's a lot of depth there.
Yeah, it sounded like you just read off the the Netflix trailer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if we're going to be the next Tiger King. There's not enough meth and tigers, but it is a fascinating story. And now we're years into this thing, and there's been these highs and lows, really hard parts, mysteries solved, things achieved, and she's been along for the ride. So we do, sometimes monthly or bi-monthly updates. She also spent the fall of 21, I think, in the EU. She went to different festivals. She's interviewed people, and different industry leaders, other HCU members. She's at PanArt in Australia today, right now.
Yep.
And I know
it's happening right now.
Happening right now. So I know she's interviewing David Kuckerman, who is also on the team. And again, just like mad shout out to David Kuckerman.
Yeah, he has some balls.
He was the.
Can I say that? Is it vulgar? Sorry, my English. I don't know what.
No, I think it's a podcast.
He has some balls. You need some balls. Come on, for this kind of battle, balls and money.
He was, I think the back end of 2021, he was the MVP. He kept the train on the rails in a way that was so important and impressive. And he just realized, like, hey, and this has happened throughout the HCU stuff. There'll just be a day or a time or a month where you're in the hot seat, and you got to do it. And that, the back end of 21, that was Kuckerman. He was kind of our boots on the ground, literally going to court dates and stuff in Germany. And, but everyone has done it. Duncan of Meridian pulled one that was so incredible. We had to come up with an expert witness statement, someone who could speak from a place that would be known and respected, and that would speak to the arguments that we were making on our side of the legal battle.
Okay.
And so it was at that time we needed like another 150,000 euros, and we also needed the expert witness statement. And I was
no big deal.
I was like, I'll work on the money, because that seems easier than trying to find this kind of unicorn person. And he pulled it off in a way that was so incredible, and it stuck the landing so hard. Yeah, so he ended up working with an emeritus professor who has a PhD in physics and specializes in musical instruments, has written books on it from a little college called Cambridge. Ever heard of it? So that was our expert witness statement as we submitted this, and you can read it. It's on hcu.global. All the legal stuff is there. When we can publish it, we publish. And that was such an incredible thing to pull off. So it's, everybody on the team at some point has done something astonishing, incredible, that kept this thing going. And so the documentary has followed all these highs and lows, and at this point, I think she's going to cut it into a podcast first. And so she's like, there's so much good stuff. How can I trim it down into a just a documentary, a docu-series but yeah, it's been, I remember we did an interview with our lawyers, and our lawyers spoke to the fact that this was such an astonishing and complicated case. In his 25 years of doing intellectual property law, he's never dealt with anything this unique and complicated. And I remember that felt really...
so like you're not the crazy one. Like,
because I'm like, it is really complicated. It is really hard, And so then I felt very,
validated.
It felt good. Yeah, that was the word. I felt very validated, and like, it is a crazy thing. So the fact that there's a chance that people could follow along, in the story that I've lived. I remember Kyle Cox is on the team, and I remember when she came along, he's like, it does feel like we're living a documentary. And I was like, oh my God, so right, man, it's so crazy. So so there's it's a total TBD of when it's going to happen, but it's out there. It's out there.
We'll have to have you back on to talk more like HCU only stuff, because I know this is something that you could do a 2-hour podcast on easy.
Oh, easy. But I need to give people some news, some updates about this. So
kind of going away from HCU to a equally complicated and confusing thing.
I know what you're going to say.
CFoulke, Aether, Radix,
Xenith.
It's super easy.
What's up, man?
Which is which?
I'll make you guys a flow chart. It'll make a ton of sense. No, I've thought about this, and there's a little blip on my FAQs on my website of like, why all the brands?
Who reads that?
Nobody. Apparently nobody reads FAQs. I don't know why we have it. No, for me, it's a pretty simple explanation. Each one was made with different techniques. Each one used a shell that was significantly different than the previous. And this is the thing, on the player side, they probably don't really even notice the difference. But on the maker side, it's significant.
Sure.
Step one, to make a handpan, what material are you going to use? Step two, how are you going to make your shell? Those decisions are so far upstream, and they have such a massive impact. Yeah, so CFoulke, I think it was just my YouTube handle, and then it became my handpan.org handle, and I just was like and then it was, on the DVDs that I did with David Kucherman. So my name was really strong, and I was like, I'm not going to move away from that. People already know me as me.
Exactly, yeah.
So I was hesitant to kind of rebrand myself when my name was already strong in the industry and the community. And all those shells were made by hand sunk, and that was kind of the CFoulke line. It's also just my name and my introduction line.
So each of these name is a chapter, a season of your building. You never go back to some techniques.
No, not really. Mainly because each one is so much more advanced than the previous one. It's really hard to justify going back. Yeah. So the ether traditionally is the fifth classical element: earth, air, fire, water, ether. And I remember, I'm going to drop a name here because I was having a discussion with John Heaven. And if you don't know John Heaven, then you missed a wonderful era of someone who was as deep as anyone has ever gone. That guy was dug in like a tick, man, in a wonderful way. I was having this conversation with John in the still kind of the secret days of hydroforming. He just made this comment. He's like, I think it's so cool that you've introduced using like water into making instruments. And I was like, oh, wow. Like when you really think about it, I'm now using all four classical elements. And that kind of led to like, oh yeah, the fifth classical element is ether. It's the root word for ethereal. I mean, how often do we hear that applied to these instruments? What an ethereal sound. And it's the space between the stars, and it uses the AE combination in the beginning, the ash.
It's a sick logo. It's a very sick logo.
Yeah, I was like, that's a great name. Yeah, and then when I went to the Radix, I shifted to using my own deep draw shells, which is again, on the player side, probably didn't feel like much, but for me, it was this huge departure from this thing that kind of put me on the map that I was going to move away from hydroforming. And then the Xenith is a giant departure from kind of the way that anybody's doing anything. It is a new technique to make these instruments, and it was a huge gamble on my part. I kind of, again, went way, way deep down a rabbit hole, took some pretty big financial risks, and fortunately it stuck the landing and it works. It's a new technique. And for me, it felt like in-house, it deserved a different name. But I remember the first time that Sylvan, you might know a guy named Sylvan. It's David's
I think he is my cousin.
It's your cousin. I remember he'd played Ethers before, and I sent him a Radix. And he messaged me back and he's like, oh my God, it feels just like an ether. And I was like, do you have any idea how hard it was to do that? Go all the way back up all the steps of making it and change step 2, and then go all the way back down the steps of making and have the end outcome feel the same. It's so hard to do. I mean, it was a high compliment. He's like, it doesn't feel any different. And I was like, that's great. It only took a year to do. So the different brands, this is a tough one because it becomes a marketing issue at some point. We're like, why all the brands? And what I think about is people have always followed me and my story and my work, and I represent my company, and then I get to do all these different things. And so you follow my work long enough, you know that I'm going to change something in a couple of years. It's just inevitable. That's just the arc of my career. But I never wanted to put myself in a corner where I only make this one thing, and that's why you know me. You know me because I do this work, and this is just the work that I'm doing right now. I'm making the Xenith right now. 2 years ago, I was making the Radix. 5 years ago, Aether. 10 years ago, CFoulke. And so I really like the arc of my career is pushing this thing forward and pushing on different realms of possibilities. And the Xenith was one I pushed on for years and, was able to do it. I remember, I haven't shared this photo ever, but for a bunch of reasons, usually you get your shells made, however you do it, in all the ways we discussed, and then they go off and get heat treated if they're not stainless steel. And I got, I think, 50 shells in the first Xenith batch. I didn't know if I was going to have to adjust my nitriding recipe, so I didn't want to put all my eggs in one basket. So I had all the shells come here, which is usually what you don't do the triangle that way. Mm-hmm. And I realized like, oh, wow, I have them all here. I don't know if this process works yet, but I should probably take the hero photo just in case. So right out here is my big shop. I tiled the floor with these 50 shells, stood in the back of my shop like I had just conquered the world, and I took the photo without knowing if it was going to work. But I'm like,
I've got a photo of nothing else. Yeah.
Take the photo, right? And then it was a couple weeks later that the first batch of shells came back, and it did work. And so I did. I'm happy I took the hero photo, but I was like, so taking that photo, I was like, oh, I was so sweaty and anxious. So just being like, oh, and you know, at that point, I was, I guess maybe $50,000 in on a hunt. There was a total reality where like I would just kill the project because it didn't work, and I would announce to the world, hey, everybody, I just spent the last 6 years working on this thing, and I'm here to tell you it did not work. Yeah. Don't bother. Don't waste your time. And other people have done that, and things that didn't work. And I'm thankful that the current thing with the Xenith, that it did work. And now we're kind of multiple iterations into the Xenith. One thing that I do is usually if I introduce something new within my process of building, I usually will kind of rein things back. And let's do a simple version of this. Make sure it works. Make sure we understand why it works. Why you
started with a 7.
This is why I started with the 7. It worked for the 7. Great. Let's go for the 8. So yeah, now there's a Xenith 7. There's a Xenith 8. Both of them can come in the standard nitride material. Both can come in stainless steel. And then beyond that, there is like the Xenith Expanse, which is alternative layouts, mutant notes, off-center, center notes, bottom notes. So it's been really fun to kind of go all the way back to be like, let's just do the classic 7-noter. And now we're a couple years in to press all the way up to like, okay, now I can also do kind of things that are current. So in-house right now that have just shown up, by the time this posts, they'll probably be out there, is the stainless Xenith 8, which has kind of been a goal for a couple of years. We dabbled with some stainless last year, and now we've kind of cycled back to it. So we're about to jump into production on that.
Nice, man.
Excellent. If you want to keep track of your experimentation and things, you are releasing some nice newsletter. I received the last one is last week. Because you did that giveaway to celebrate the 10 years, right?
Yeah, it's kind of an astonishing thing to have been doing this for 10 years.
10 years.
I've
crazy, man.
Have been fortunate to be around tons of artists and craftspeople along my journey, and it's really kind of soul crushing to see how many don't make it. Mm-hmm. How many they don't last, but they can't hack the business side of things. And so I've always held on to this fear that I won't get to do this for as long as I wanted. And I think hitting 10 years kind of is allowing me to release some of those trepidations and fears to be like, hey, you've made it 10 years. Clearly, you're doing something right. Thank you. And there's always stressors when running your own business. And my mindset now is when I'm worried and stressed about something, I have to take a step back and be like, do you really think this is going to be the one? Do you really think this is going to be the thing that's going to sink the ship? And 10 years kind of says, yeah, probably not. It's probably not going to be the thing that's going to end your career. But yeah, kind of it's been an interesting process, and I have been sending out kind of these bigger thought emails that I'm just reflecting over a decade of work, a decade in an industry. And, it's going back to what you had said, David, and you, Dan, that, sometimes people get a lot of attention for the first things that they make. And it's very true in the handpan world. There's always the cool new kid on the block. Yeah. And I had a discussion with one of these cool new kids, maybe last year. It was Josh Rivera, who he's been around for a long time, but is now doing his own work and making his own instruments, and is getting a lot of attention, as he should. And I said, it's great. It's great to be the cool new kid, but just wait till the next cool new kid comes along and you're old new. I was like, that's actually when it's going to get hard. You think it's hard right now. It's not. Yeah. The moment, like, how do you continue to stay relevant? How do you continue to garner attention from this industry that is growing at this exponential rate? Yeah.
Honestly, that could be one episode, how to deal with these kind of things, and also with competitors and everything to keep your mind, your heart kind of clean. And tough. It's a tough.
We'll have an
job
episode. It'll be the three of us and two therapists, and we'll talk about.
Yeah. No, it's a tough job in many ways.
Yeah, man.
And you did these 10 years. We wish you some 10 more.
Absolutely.
10 more, and we'll see for the next 10 ones.
That's it, man. We'll be here for it. But the last thing that I wanted to kind of, before we take a little break here, the people might have seen you on. You have one of my favorite stories, scenarios that happened to you on your Japanese trip.
I know which one.
So,
because I was there.
I don't even want to preface it and screw it up. If you could just give a short story to what happened to you in Japan to everybody.
I can do this. I can do this. So I had mentioned earlier that David and I had done this tour in China, and I was there in China, and I did like a trip from China and then to Burma and back to China. So I'd been kind of in Western China for 2 weeks. I was pretty traveled out at that point. It had been really intensive, really great, but a lot. And then maybe half of the performers that were in China also then carried on kind of 2 weeks later to do a 3-day festival in Tokyo with the Tokyo Handpan Lab. And so in my mindset, I was like, okay, I'm going to go do these 5 days in Japan, and then I get to go home. I was kind of already in that mindset. I was missing my wife. I was missing my kids. I was in a country that was very foreign to me. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to go do the thing in Tokyo, which I was excited about. And I was like, and then I get to go home. And the flights were such that it took me 24 hours to fly from Western China to Tokyo overnight. I had a 9-hour layover in Kunming. I had to sleep on a bench in South Korea. And so I land, it's morning in the Tokyo airport, the main one. And my instructions were I was to find Lauri Wulio. He was flying in from Finland. We were to find each other at the airport, and then we were to go to the hotel. Our plan was to get to the hotel, take a nap, and go out for dinner, and that was going to be our day. We were both going to be pretty ragged by the time we hit there. So I walk out of the terminal. I've got all my, I've got my backpack. I was traveling kind of light, and I'm trying to get on the Wi-Fi, and I get rushed by a full camera crew. I mean, I look up, there's a boom mic over my head. There's 5 people, and someone rattles off something in Japanese, a language that I don't speak, into a microphone. They say whatever they say, and then they I was like so deer in the headlights. I was like, do you guys have the Wi-Fi password? Like what? And they have a translator, and so the translator says like, hey, we're wondering like, why did you come to Japan? And I hadn't heard from Lauri, and I was like, sure, I'll play ball. I've got some time to kill. And so I answer their questions, and I say, look, I'm a musician, and I'm here to do this performance. And I have a tattoo, which I show on TV of like, and they're like, well, can we see one of the instruments? Can we see one of the instruments? And I was like, oh, I don't have them, because the problem is that I flew to China with 2 instruments, performed on them, and then sold them in China, and then traveled to Japan. Weeks earlier, I had sent 2 instruments to Japan that were then at the Tokyo Handpan Lab that I was going to do the same thing with. I'd perform on them and sell them. So at that moment in the airport, I didn't have an instrument to show them. And I think that I accidentally just put the hooks in real deep. Yeah. Now they're like, oh, now you got to go into Tokyo to find them? Yeah. We have to follow you. Can we follow? I said, no, no, thank you. I'm happy to, no, thanks. That's not why I'm here. I'm happy to do the little meet and greet at the airport, whatever. I gave them my card that I had, and they gave me a flyer that had like an English blurb of what the show was. And I took it and put it in my pocket, found Lauri, got on the train, and I was like, that was weird. And so I tell Lauri, and he's like, yeah, that's good one. That's a good story. So we get to the hotel, and the guys behind the counter, their English was pretty good. They're younger guys. And I pull this thing out. I'm like, do you guys know what this is? And they're like, oh. They're like, that's a huge show. And I was like, no way. And they pull it up on YouTube on their phones. And I was like, huh. And so then I messaged Reo, who is the head of Tokyo Handpan Lab. And I was like, hey, funny thing. And he was like, bro, that's like Monday night primetime TV. That's a huge show. And so I was like, and so I asked him, I said, look, like, I don't I don't need to do this for me. I don't really care either way. But would this be good for the festival? Would this be good for the handpan in Japan? And then I kind of thought, like, would this just be good for the handpan?
Yeah.
And so I kind of found myself in this position where, like, once again, I got to be kind of this conduit of, I got to introduce an entire nation of Japan to this instrument that they haven't really heard of. But this show, they practice really hands-off journalism. They are literally there just to observe you move and interact with their country. It is then kind of put on where the hosts watch the episode as it's happening. They kind of take the piss. They kind of make fun. Hey, it's funny, you know, watching foreigners just bumble through a country.
Did they translate it for you? Like, was Rayo, or did anybody, like, were they making fun of you, or were they kind to you?
So we'll get to that at the end. But so I went to email them back, and they'd already emailed me, and I said, like, all right, let's do it. So for the next 4 days in Japan, I had a camera crew with me the entire time. But what I realized is that they literally would follow me anywhere. All they want to do is just be like, what are you doing? What are you doing today? You know, and I just was like, okay, so I'm the director now.
Yeah.
I'm the director now. And so I was like, I'm just going to blow everybody up. I was like, first thing we're doing is we're going to the Japanese handpan makers workshop, Sonobe. We're going to his shop. We're putting him on TV. We're going to Rayo's place. We're putting him on TV. I was like, we're putting everybody on TV.
Wow.
And it was this kind of unique experience, right? I was the fish in the fishbowl, but it's just as interesting being the fish because I got to look out and see everyone looking at me. So I got to spend 4 days with these people that live in Tokyo. This is their job. And, you know, they kind of, I wish I would have said it. They said, you know, when they said, like, can we come with you? And I was like, you can try to keep up because, like, I'm a dad gone wild in Tokyo with my friends from all over the world. I'm burning this candle from both ends. I've got 5 days. I can just burn it from both ends for 5 days. And so we were
sleep when you got home.
Yeah, we were like 9 a.m. to 2 a.m. days, you know? And so there was times where I was like, guys, just cut the cameras. We're going to all need to sit down and eat if we're going to get through the next chapter of this day.
Yeah.
And I had a translator with me the whole time. You know, what a luxury to go through a country with a translator.
That's
I can tell you, it's not easy to buy train tickets in Japan, but it is when you got a local with you.
Right.
So I left Japan, having no idea what was going to happen with that. They followed up and they wanted like baby pictures, childhood pictures. You know? And I was just kind of like, whatever, man. I'm gonna ride this wave and see what happens. And then it went radio silent. So this is like May of 2019, and early 2020, I get an email and it's like, hey, your episode's going to air. And I was like, oh, I kind of, it just felt like a fever dream. Did that really happen?
Yeah.
And then Rayo sent me the link. He got a link to it and sent it to me. And he sent it to me at like 3 a.m. when it aired. And I remember I woke my wife up and I was like, I can't watch this alone. You know, I was watching it through fingers like this. I don't know. It could be an hour of me just making social faux pas. It could be an hour of me just eating sushi.
Yeah.
Gorging myself like a fat American.
Right, yeah. Dumb American goes through Tokyo.
It could have been every single one of those. And so the 4 days of shooting got condensed to, and I love this, with commercials, it was an actual 15 minutes. So I got my 15 minutes of fame. It was literally 15 minutes and 1 second. And I was like, check. So the episode is still there. It's still on my website. You can find it. I won't speak to it because if you want to watch it, you can watch it. What I will say is everything that happened is as it happened. And I remember I kind of like finished watching the episode and I was like, that was okay.
That was my days.
Yeah, and so I will say, like the actual director totally kind of broke the fourth wall as she kind of got sucked into the story. But you know, I spent 4 days with this person. We got, you know, became friends, and it was a fascinating thing. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I was on national TV.
That story is
it's
you cannot even
best.
imagine that story.
I remember I came home to come back to be dad and husband and, you know, changing diapers and stuff. And I remember telling my wife, I was just like, honey, I'm going to come down so hard from this trip. Because in my mind, right, I was like, oh, cool, I'll like do these couple days in Tokyo and then I get to go home.
Yeah.
And then I just had this like wild wild experience. And I remember I told her, I was like, honey, if you ever see me feeling a little down or feeling a little blue, all you got to do is just clip a lapel mic right here. It's going to make me feel so good about myself. No, and it's like, I'm still in touch with some of those people from Japan, from the TV show.
That's a great community over there too, man. Like the Tokyo Handpan world, man. Oh my God.
They were so good to us. And what a, what a position to be in. What an honor to be trusted with literally introducing an entire
That was
nation.
the first time handpan on TV in Japan?
To my knowledge, yeah. And not only that, but that show it goes to Hong Kong, it goes to Hong Kong too. So like it goes beyond the borders of Japan.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
cool.
I know. I don't know if you guys ever played that game, Two Truths and a Lie, where you say three things about yourself.
Yeah.
I was like, I remember I came home from that. And I was like, my Two Truths and a Lie game just got way stronger.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, definitely a unique life experience. And no, I think about it from the perspective of my children. What a crazy time in my life to get captured on national TV. And, it is like this little time capsule that if they ever want to know what Dad was doing in 2019, Dad was on TV in Japan.
Dad was on TV in Japan. Excellent.
The Handpan Show is brought to you by Master the Handpan, the world's largest online handpan educational platform. Whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced player, or want to learn from one of your favorite players, Master the Handpan has everything you need to improve your skills and have fun. Feeling lost while searching for your first handpan? Master the Handpan has you covered with our one-stop marketplace, connecting you with reputable makers to find your perfect instrument. Join our thriving community of over 15,000 handpan players and share your passion with like-minded handpan enthusiasts. Master the Handpan. Learn fast, have fun.
All right, man. So one more thing before we get you out of here, we're gonna start doing a little non-handpan rapid fire questions to get to know the man who is CFoulke, Radix, Xenith, who the mastermind behind them all. You ready? It's 10 questions.
We do one each. We do one each. We just
them. You have the list in front of you.
Yeah.
Cool.
You go first. One each.
So Colin, you could answer it, and then if there's like any brief story that comes to mind, feel free to expand on it. What was the first album you've ever owned?
The one that really, I listened to a lot of Beatles growing up, but the one that I remember was gifted to me for like my 12th birthday was Californication, Red Hot Chili Peppers. And that's when I was like, this is music. Like, I remember like I had a CD player and I'd put my headphones on. I was like, that one. Excellent. Yeah, that one hooked me big time.
What is your dream collaboration? Could be playing or building.
Oh, that's a good question. There was like I did a show in St. Petersburg in Russia, and I met a guy who I was aware of him, that he had these videos, and David, you might remember these. He's a harp player, and there was a couple of videos of him playing with one guy or two guys on handpans. And I met him and I was like, oh my God, you're so amazing. And he was like, to me, he was like, I would love to collaborate. And I was like, I want to, but I was leaving the next day. Then it just feels like the Craigslist misconnection where we like, oh, I think about and it's like he is a cellist as well. And I was a cellist. And so I think we both still think in cello, even though he's playing the harp and I'm playing handpans. So that
would be him, right?
Yeah, that would be him.
All right, who is one artist that you love that people would be shocked to find out?
Tell the truth.
Oh, tell the truth. Oh man. I've been listening to a little bit of Taylor Swift.
You said it. Okay. We keep it. Okay. What is the story in your first kiss?
Story of my first kiss. Wow, it's a deep cut. It was kind of a classic one. I grew up at the beach, and in my city, there's a pier that goes way out into the water. And so it was actually like a pretty great first kiss. There's this girl that was kind of like seeing. I was maybe in middle school. We had like the very romantic first kiss out on the pier. Not
pretty good. That's very California.
No, that's good.
Very California. What was your most embarrassing moment on stage?
Eesh. I'm sure I've repressed it to the point where it's going to be hard to dig that back.
Open it up, dude. Open it up.
Well, most embarrassing moment on stage. I don't know. You know, I was in orchestras and symphonies growing up, and I was. Can you hear my compressor just kicked on?
No.
Okay. So sorry. Most embarrassing moment on stage. Fortunately, it was I don't really have a big one. I was in orchestras and symphonies growing up, and I grew up at the beach, so I was always mortified to have to put on the blacks and whites, to put on the suits to perform. Yeah. And it's just there was ties involved, and I remember, maybe it wasn't on stage, but I remember I was in a symphony. I was the first chair cellist. We were going to have a big performance, and we were at this kind of event center that had a big hall, but it also had soccer fields attached to it, kind of thing. And I was there in the full black and whites, taking a group photo of the symphony, and a bunch of my older brother's friends who were playing soccer there walked by, and they see me, and they lit me up. They absolutely lit me up. And so it wasn't quite on stage, but I just remember and I was probably a teenager, you know?
Yeah.
And just to get lit up by your brother's friends in front of the whole symphony, you're just oh, it was and it's not like I can hide behind somebody. I'm
exactly.
So that was pretty mortifying.
You're welcome. Now you're going to think about that all day, I'm sure. I'm sorry about that.
I'm sweating just thinking about it. Oh, goodness.
All right, be honest for that one. What is your favorite food?
Favorite food? Ooh.
You can go nasty.
I don't know. This is a big thing that happens with me and my wife is she's really just kind of happy to eat food. I have food moods where I'm I liked it yesterday, but I don't really want to eat it right now. So
What's the current one?
Well, I know I made paella last night, which I was pretty excited about. But food's a little tricky for me. I've got some dietary stuff. So, but no, if my kids were here, they would answer for me. They say tacos. It's tacos.
Tacos. There you go.
Yeah, it took me a minute to get there, but no, it's dude, the answer, it's always tacos.
Again, very California answer.
My kid would be my older kid would be no, Dad, you had tacos for breakfast, and then you had tacos for lunch, and then you made us tacos for dinner. Dad, it's
who is your current favorite handpan artist?
Oh, to be really frank, I actually really don't follow a lot of people who play anymore. I kind of just do my own work. But one person that I come back to a lot, or anytime I see them play, I'm just I'm such a fan. There's two that kind of come to mind that I think are a little underrated. We all know that they're great, but when you see them and you can really appreciate what they do, David, your cousin, Sylvan, phenomenal. Yeah. He's so subtle in what he does. I remember there was a professional surfer who always got really underscored on his waves, but it's because he was so smooth. He made it look effortless. And when someone is they get to that point where they're so good and they make it look so effortless, it's actually really hard to appreciate because you don't even know how good they are and what they're doing. And then the other person who I see play and I'm always excited about and I've been a fan of him for a long time, is Yaron Tripp of Archer and Tripp.
Yeah.
Subtle, really, and his way of touching the instrument is
super
smooth.
I remember I had come across some of his earlier videos. There's a video where he's on a TV show and it's just a 3-minute clip. He's sitting on a cajon and he has a foot pedal to play the cajon. And
that song,
and it's
first album, right?
It's so good, and I'm that was a really long time ago, and he was playing at a high level, and he's going to continue on. So for me, those are I get inspired to try to play in the way that those guys play, in that I want you to hear twice as much as you're seeing when I'm playing,
right?
And I want you to think that it's not very hard to do what I'm doing. And
those are two good ones for that then.
And I see those guys do it just so effortlessly in a way where I'm I don't think people really know how good that is.
There's a lot going on there.
And simple is hard to do, and there's a lot going on. Exactly. Two hobbies outside of music?
I'm always kind of working on things and building things. So anytime you're in my shop, there's all of my work, and then there's usually something thing I'm working on. Over the last 2 years, I've been dabbling with electronic bikes, with e-bikes. So I've built out my own electric bikes.
This is good.
And I think the next one that's coming is, it's still winter here in California, but I think my goal for the summer is to get educated about solar and how solar panels work. And I want to try to only charge my electric bike with whatever thing I've made with solar, and see if I can get through the entire summer just doing that. There's a big push for solar here in California, and I don't really know much about it. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll take on a small project to wrap my head around it before I kind of look to invest. This isn't this isn't a hobby, but I do actually have another job right now. I think Dan knows what it is. Dave might not. I am one day a week, I am a lifeguard at the local pool. Yeah.
It's him. He's the one blowing the whistle. No running. That's him.
Oh yeah. Hey, walk. A lot of that. So I guess swimming is a hobby. It's how I like to exercise. I grew up in the ocean, and swimming is always. And I'm built like Phelps, man. I'm 6'5", size 16 feet. Like this is. I tell people, I'm like, I don't often feel graceful in this body. I do feel graceful in the water. That's what this body. I've always been doing water sports, and so swimming has been one. And then because of COVID, you may have heard of COVID. Because of COVID, there was a national lifeguard shortage in the United States. With how things work, you have to re-up your certification every 2 years to be an active lifeguard, and nobody did because there were no pools were open. And so we came into the summer of 2022, and we were going to be the pool's going to be open, and they were going to be short-staffed. And they approached me, and they're like, "You're always here at like odd hours. Like, what do you do? How are you available?" And so they on this thing, they're like, "We have these 2 shifts we cannot fill, and we're going to have to close the pool, or the manager's going to have to work these shifts Wednesday, Friday, 12 to 3." So I did the certification, which was hilarious in that it was me and a bunch of 15-year-olds. And so you can imagine, again, just to emphasize, I'm 6'5", very big guy. And I was working with these teenagers, and we had to simulate rescues in the pool. So I'm down 12 feet on the bottom of the pool, and this little 15-year-old has to dive down there and try to drag me up. And it became just this joke that in any of these rescue scenarios that we were practicing, that we would do it with each other's partners, and then everyone would have to rescue me. I was the final boss. Like if you can rescue Colin and you can get him out on a backboard, yeah, you're gonna be able to rescue anybody. So that's kind of this funny thing that I've been doing. But and David and Dan, I'm sure you guys can imagine that work-life balance, especially running your own business, is a really challenging thing to get right. It is. And I think I can tell you,
we'll never fix it.
And I can tell you, in 2021, I got it wrong. I got work-life stuff got way out of whack. The Xenith launched and it hit big. HCU stuff was really heavy. And I would say, I should leave the shop today. I should get out. I should do something. And I just wouldn't, because there's always a reason to not. And so becoming a lifeguard kind of forced my hand in a way. In a structured way, I have to leave. I have to take this hat off.
Guard your life.
And, one thing that the handpan makers don't get is sunshine and people much. And so being at a local public pool, I get both of those. I get a really nice, healthy dose of socializing, and I'm outside, and it's been a really good thing for me. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. 2 more.
2 more.
What is the one song that makes you happy every time you hear it?
I could go straight to the Beatles. Anything from Rubber Soul on the Beatles. It has such positive childhood memories for me. Just that album. Anything on that album.
Gotcha.
Yeah, works for me.
If you had $1 million, what would be the first thing you buy?
Hey, who says I don't?
As we say, the first one is always hard, but then it gets better.
No, that's a good question. I'm going to answer it kind of in the boring way. I am so fortunate in life that I kind of really want for nothing.
One thing,
come on, man.
Come on, the taco.
No, I'm completely serious. I'm in this so fortunate place that I want for nothing. My family has what they need. I have what I need. We have our health.
But that crazy thing, like
I come to your house with a check for $1 million. I said, you need to spend this in 20 minutes
right
or I
now.
take it back.
Done. I pay off my mortgage. Done.
Mortgage, yeah.
I pay off my house. Done. Easy. You guys are trying to ask me for this man. Question. You got to remember, I'm a husband and I'm a father.
TV star.
Well, TV star. I mean,
Japanese TV star.
I wear so many hats.
Right.
No, I
know what you mean.
Yeah, I'm a husband,
everything you need.
a father. Everything else is secondary. So the fact that we have what we need, we're provided for.
It's a good answer.
I would buy a video studio.
You
cannot see my setup, but it's such a mess.
No, to speak to that, right? Like I did it. I made the transition. I'm in a workshop on my home. I did it. This was a humongous goal. When I left my previous workshop, which was a workshop amongst 26 other studios in this big facility, I think I was the only one that ever left for greener pastures. Everyone else didn't make it. And so I'm like, I did it.
You're there.
It's a really, I was trying to explain that to my older daughter because, they just hoppity skippity into the backyard and are in dad's shop. And I'm like, for me as a person, it's such a big achievement to have done it. Like, that's what I mean. I'm like, if you would ask me that maybe 4 years ago, I would have said, I want this
workshop.
Yeah. I want something like this. A place where I can have my business, my workshop, and my family kind of all in one place. So
that's awesome. That's awesome, man. All right. Well,
it is.
The great Colin Foulke. Thank you for spending some time with us, buddy. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for being his story with us.
That's it. What you gotta? This is your cameras are on you. What's the plugs? Where can everybody find you?
No, I'll leave with this. When I move through my day to day, people don't really understand what I do. At the average person checking out at the grocery store, like, how was work today? And you're like, I couldn't even begin to explain it. I was working with the legal team in the EU. I was working with big production and supply chain problems. And to a lot of people, I'm just like that drum guy. Like, oh, hey, you're that guy with the drums, right? So for me to have people in the industry like you two, who I really respect, who really get the nitty gritty, to come and engage me about all the nitty gritty, it's so good for me too. So I really appreciate it. Yeah, and if you want to know more about me or my work, xenithhandpans.com, spelled with an X. If you spell with a Z, I own that domain too. So
there you go.
xenithhandpans.com if you want to follow my work. And I have a blog that I've been keeping up where you can kind of learn about my history. And there's some deep cuts in the About Me section where you can read more about stuff we spoke about, or watch that episode on Japan. But I'll leave it at that.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for everything you're doing since so many years for the community and for all of us.
That's it. See you later, man.
See ya.
Ciao, ciao.